Where am I?
Our second session is surrogacy for Australians in Nepal. We did at one time have three speakers. I gather we're down to two, but that's not going to present us with any problem. I'd like to introduce our moderator, who's Brian Yaden. Brian's a partner and client manager of Family Surrogacy, which is based in Miami, and they run full service programs in Nepal and Mexico. He's the father of a lovely little baby girl who I've met through surrogacy, and he and his husband Henry have frozen embryos still in Nepal, and they're about to go back and try and add to their family. So without any further ado, I'll introduce Brian and leave him to run this session. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for spending a little bit of time with us here. So today, again, my name is Brian Yaden, and as the doctor said, I'm a client manager and a partner in Family Surrogacy. We offer surrogacy in Mexico and Nepal, but today's session is about Nepal. I want to introduce our panelists here today. We have Dr. Vishnu Dini down on the end there. I'll read what we have about here. He's a world-renowned embryologist and owner of Venus Suman IVF Center in Kathmandu. He has 14 years of experience in fertility. His success rates are among the highest in the region, and he's a highly sought-after embryologist, not only in Nepal, but assisting others throughout India and countries in Africa as well. Dr. Dini has trained many other doctors and scientists in fertility specialties such as IVF and ICSI, and he's led embryology of hundreds of successful surrogacy cases. Family Surrogacy is the exclusive agency for Australians wishing to do surrogacy at Venus Suman in Nepal. We also have Megan Sainsbury, my partner here in Australia. Megan became involved with international surrogacy in 2008 when there were very few options for surrogacy overseas with very little information. After several false starts and a clinic change, Megan and her husband Bob welcomed the birth of their son Toby through surrogacy in India back in 2010. The new family was just thrilled about the arrival of a daughter and sister, Mishali, that was born in June of 2012. Passionate that international surrogacy was an excellent option for people who could not have children by conventional methods, Megan began to work with intended parents worldwide and has worked with more than 500 families during the past 7 years. And Henry is my husband over here, and we have our little daughter, Patty. She's the head of marketing. And she joined us on this trip, and we take her everywhere we go. We can't be away from her, anyway. So today's discussion is about Nepal. We have several topics to cover. We only have about 20 minutes, so we're going to try to run through them very quickly. This is going to be kind of a question and answer type of a thing. So the first thing is we have gotten a lot of questions about what's happening in Nepal right now with the recent earthquakes that have taken place. So I'll just turn that over to our panelists, and we'd like to hear from Dr. Dini. Just tell us about your assessment with the boots on the ground that you have there, how things are in Nepal with the recent tremors.
Actually, only a few parts of Nepal got affected, especially in Kathmandu. Not all, which the media has been showing on the TV and everything. But there are buildings which were built 18th century ago. Those have been, demolished. But other new buildings are okay, fine. Nothing to worry about it. We is this on? Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. I'll be lying in there tonight, and I won't be staying in a tent. With our particular clinic, and from what I hear from the other agencies and clinics, the media, of course, always focuses on Darfur Square, where you've got your 18th century temples, and the older areas where the buildings have fallen down, but you'll see the same buildings over and over and over again. And because it's such a big, powerful earthquake, and the media is always going to, as it does with surrogacy, focus on the horrible stories, that's really what's going on. So our building has a glass
panels all over it. There's not one crack in any panel. Our surrogate accommodation lost power for about half a day. We didn't lose any power in the clinic. We didn't lose any internet connection in the clinic. So that's quite different to what you will hear on the media repeatedly. Having said that, I am personally going to check it out because I would not send anybody to a country that has just had an earthquake, in fact 2 rather large ones and continuing tremors, if I don't feel safe to go there. So.
And you're flying out tonight?
And I'm flying out tonight.
Okay. We've also gotten a lot of questions over the last day or so about, what's the standard in Nepal for, on the front end, for screening donors and for screening surrogates? And we all know how important this is before you get your program started. We'd like to hear from the panel about not only in our own business and family surrogacy and at Venus, but in general, what is the, just from an educational standpoint, in Nepal, what is the standard, and then what do you do, Dr. Dini, in terms of screening?
Actually, we are following ASRM guidelines for screening the donors and the surrogates, and you can see there are lots of, big list of screening over here, and you can go and check in our counter too. And you can ask if you have more screening, if you want your donor to be screened, some special test, we can do that. And and donors and surrogates too. We also do psychological screening by a psychologist, and you will be having an access to the surrogates. You can assess them anytime, and it is not anything confidential.
Essentially what he's saying is that I'm, as you know, I'm a parent through surrogacy, and in fact Dr. Dini made my babies and looked after them in their little petri dishes for the first 5 days of their lives, so we go way back. I didn't think to ask for reports. I just wanted a baby, and I didn't think to demand a report. I just accepted that the medical screening would be done, and I never asked for proof. 5 years down the track, I've heard from other IPs that there have been some problems. There is one case where a baby has come back from India and that baby has chlamydia because the surrogate mother had chlamydia, and that clearly was not screened for. You have the right to request every test and the report. There's no such thing about this is the surrogate's confidential information. That's rubbish, okay? So you need to ask that whether you're going to Mexico, whether you're going to Nepal, India, Greece, wherever you go, you've got a right to that information. I purely just didn't, I just went in blindly. I wanted a baby so much. I was just, so over not being a mother. But you have got the right to ask for that. And be suspicious if your clinic will not give you those tests. Of course, they should be in the name of your surrogate mother, and you should also get all your tests throughout pregnancy, of course. They should be the standard tests that any American surrogate mother or any altruistic surrogate mother in Australia gets. You tend to get more screening tests done, particularly with the clinic, well, pretty much all of them, but because it's surrogacy, you're so far away, your pregnancy reports, you get far more reports than you would get if it was your own pregnancy in your own home country. You can always request additional tests. Another important thing with the pregnancy tests is that you've got a right to take your pregnancy test to your own OBGYN for a second opinion, and have that doctor contact your doctor in whatever country it is and discuss it if there's anything you're concerned about. A good clinic will open themselves up to your agent and to your doctor. So don't be afraid to ask for the tests. And if you get brushed off, you're probably it's a big red flag if you get brushed off and if you were told it's the surrogate mother's private information.
Yeah. And if I may add to that, I think most of you were in the session yesterday about how to cope when things don't go to plan, and you heard the story that Henry and I shared about us being trapped in Thailand when things shut down there, the mistake we made in picking a large multinational agency that was filled with investors, but lots of money and all over the place, Again, that was my fault. Sorry, Henry. Henry wanted to originally go with Megan, and I said, well, shouldn't we pick a really big company? And he said, sure, okay. But when things went south in Thailand, we ended up not even being able to find our surrogate because we didn't have any communication with her because the agency didn't really want us to. When we were trying to get reports out of them, like Megan just said, we were turned away or not answered, and those are all big red flags. And Megan came in and saved the day, and we really appreciate that. And that's how we ended up becoming partners with her. She found our surrogate in a matter of weeks and saw the whole thing all the way through pregnancy. And so now we've learned your agency should be answering those questions and be very forthcoming about
and
it.
And I didn't charge him.
I've told people that. You didn't charge us anything. So this leads then to once your program
Can I
is...
just pop in there? The reason why we were able to do that was because I had a manager, a Thai manager, who was employed in in Thailand, and she was able to do it because the main clinic, which most of the agencies used in Thailand, the surrogate mothers would go in for their tests, and there might be 20 surrogate mothers sitting in the one particular clinic. And if my manager was there, they would talk. They would all talk. Who are you with? Who are your IPs? When that terrible situation with the shutdown in Thailand happened, I was useless, pretty much, but I had someone who was there, and that's what our particular agency does. We either have someone there, or I go there, or Brian or Henry go there. Other agencies do the same as well, and that's very important to make sure that you have someone there, that you have direct contact with a surrogate, because not just me, but we were getting desperate calls, not only from parents who couldn't find their surrogates, but from the surrogate mothers. There were 12 surrogate mothers who contacted my manager asking us to find their agent and to find their IPs. We weren't able to do that. We would have wanted to, but we weren't able to. You should always have access to your surrogate mother, the same as you would if you're doing surrogacy in Australia or in the USA.
Thank you, and that's a very good segue to the next question, which is about, once your donor has been selected and your transfer's occurred and you're pregnant, let's talk a little bit about the care and well-being of the surrogates throughout the program, and maybe without mentioning anybody else, kind of Dr. Dini, the standard in Nepal, and then maybe we could talk a little bit more specifically about our program, because that's what we can talk about. Dr. Dini, in Nepal, kind of the standard of agencies in terms of care, could you address that?
Yeah, we have a full-time nurse, 2 nurses over there, and we have a caretaker over there and guards over there to protect them. And we are actually having, because staying 9 months over there, it is very difficult. So we have to engage them in certain kind of program like computers and teaching something. We are taking care of that, and we are really taking care of our surrogate. They are our family. We are treating them as our family, not as a surrogate mother.
Because without the surrogate mothers, none of this would be possible.
Yes.
And I've learned a lot of things in the past 5-6 years, and I have learned some things that are not pretty, and I've learned that not all agencies and clinics treat the surrogates correctly. And essentially, we set up the surrogacy program with Venus Suman. We hire the surrogates, recruit the surrogates, we pay the surrogates, we have the accommodation. Our particular accommodation is a 12-bedroom, 4-bathroom, 2 kitchen,
Yeah.
with a rooftop and this scary spiral staircase, which is a surrogate-free zone where you can look over the whole of Kathmandu. It's lovely. Demand to see surrogate accommodation. You're allowed to do that. You're allowed to see surrogate accommodation. Now, the situation in Nepal is that your surrogate mother will be from India, not from Nepal, so they cannot stay in their own accommodation. In Mexico, some agencies have accommodation. Some agencies have the surrogates living in their own home. Some of the surrogates don't live in Tabasco where they need to give birth, they live close by, so clearly they're going to need to go into some kind of accommodation in Tabasco when the time for birth approaches. Is surrogate accommodation a bad thing versus a surrogate living in her own home? Yes and no. If the surrogate accommodation is lovely and not a horrible slum, because, you know, we hear these stories about how Indian surrogates are pulled from the sewer and living in little shanties and this and that. Come and see our accommodation, but go and see everyone's accommodation. A bit hard if you're going into the surrogate's home, but provided the accommodation is good, there's nothing evil or bad about surrogate accommodation, which is necessary in Nepal. And there's also nothing bad about a surrogate remaining in her own home, provided that she has access to medical attention quickly. And this is one of the problems we encountered in Thailand, was that the surrogate mothers were, we learned afterwards, were living 6, 8, 10 hours bus ride away in villages at home, and they were meant to be in Bangkok, close to the medical. That was not the truth. When my company discovered this, I moved them all at my own cost to down into Bangkok, because that's what we promised the clients, and that was not what was being given. There was no surrogate accommodation with the main provider of surrogacy in Thailand. So, you know, we learn from the things that we see that we don't like, but I really get sick of hearing about the bad stories in the media, because some surrogates are treated badly. Some surrogates in America are treated badly. It doesn't matter where you go, some are. So, you know, we all need to lift the game. We all need to do the very best we can.
Right.
And a lot of people do it very well, not just us.
So what, very pointedly, and specifically about Nepal, if somebody's considering going to Nepal, what kind of questions should they be asking their agent about surrogate care?
About surrogate care, well, what is your surrogate going to do for 9 months? Because she will be away from her family. If she has children, are her children going to stay with her? Because nobody wants to separate families. Is her husband going to be visiting, or is she going to be going back to Delhi or wherever in India? What kind of contact is she going to have with her family? Not all children are accommodated with their surrogate mothers. Some of the accommodation, you'll have 5 surrogates per room, and some you'll have great accommodation, so ask to see for it. What is your surrogate going to be doing? Is she going to be sitting there for 9 months watching TV? Because how boring is that going to be? Yeah. So what kind of vocational training, what kind of education, what kind of exercise program, very important, is going to be offered? What are they going to do for 9 months? And also, what kind of contact are you going to have with them? That's very important too. What kind of care does your surrogate mother have? In terms of the psychological counselling, get a copy of the counsellor, the psychiatrist, or the psychologist who is providing the counselling, ongoing counselling for the surrogate mother. Is it the caretaker or the agent who has recruited the surrogate who is doing this counselling, or is it a qualified person with actual experience in counselling? That's very important too, because we would demand this from American surrogacy, we demand it in Australia. Why not over there? There's too many corners being cut. You have a right to have psychological reports.
Okay, thank you. So once the baby's born and it's time to get the baby back home, we've gotten a lot of questions about the process. I've learned that there's another session sometime today with Poonam. I'm not sure at what time it is that there's going to be a more pointed discussion about that, and we don't want to step on their toes, but just quickly, if you wouldn't mind, in a couple of minutes, because we need to save time for a few questions, if you could summarize, particularly for Australians in Nepal, what we see the process being now that the first babies have been born, if you would, please.
Just very briefly, the first twins to an Australian couple were born 2 weeks ago.
Yes.
They're Dr. Dini babies. So his staff are handling the exit process along with Poonam Jain. Poonam, is Poonam in the room? Yep. Okay, Poonam will be speaking more about this later, because she's the specialist. She's got the contact. She knows what she's doing, and so we rely on her. You can do the process yourself. It will take you a long time. I did the process myself twice, and it took 4 weeks and then 5 weeks, and we're on the ball. This is India, of course. With India, I think we had one Australian couple out in 10 days. She got really quick there. But the process has always changed. So at the moment, the Australian High Commission in Delhi, which is going to be processing the citizenship, is saying allow 6 to 8 weeks. You do not need to go down to Delhi at this stage, but keep in mind that things can and do change. So the process that we saw for exit in India, because it's being handled by the High Commission in Delhi, it should be the same as it is for Nepal, because they're both processing it. What we saw in Thailand was that it was slightly different. India, the surrogate never had to go in for an appointment with the embassy. They did in Thailand. Mexico, a DNA test, one set of twins home so far, unless a few weeks ago, a DNA test wasn't required. So there were other requirements for visas and whether a Mexican passport was needed and things like that. That process took 4 months, but one would expect that the first couple through, it's going to be less and less. But, you know, everything changes, but you always need to allow the most amount of time possible. Because someone else got out in 3 weeks, it doesn't mean you're going to get out in 3 weeks. There's always holidays, there's closures of things, there's military juntas coming in and messing things, there's earthquakes. Apparently Mexico gets earthquakes too, I didn't know that.
So apparently in the next few weeks it's going to work itself out and we'll know more.
The process does get a lot quicker. It does get a lot quicker. You don't, you can do the process yourself, and a lot of the clinics have a lawyer. There's one lawyer in Mexico who tends to handle the majority of surrogacy cases, and he's handled the Australian babies who came home. Get a local lawyer, okay? But you should also speak to a lawyer, particularly if you're from Queensland, New South Wales or ACT. You should speak to a lawyer, about a family lawyer, about parenting orders, about the criminality. And it's Paul Bauer, who is on the Surrogacy Australia committee. He's very, very experienced with this, and he can carry you through with a parenting order if you need be, if you need to get that. Personally, I didn't get one because I was from Western Australia, and so there was no geographical nexus. But do speak to a lawyer about that. It's absolutely well worth the few $100s for it. It will set your mind at rest. Make sure it's a family lawyer who can take you through the parenting process if that's what you want to do afterwards. Not just any lawyer. You can't just... And I've actually noticed there's been some law firms like Shine and, you know, the ones that pay no fee, who have suddenly become surrogacy lawyers. Make sure they really are first.
Thank you for that, Megan.
Yeah.
Before we've got a few minutes for questions, maybe like 3 minutes. I just wanted to say thank you again to the good doctor here, and thanks for the introduction. Henry and I we did get our embryos out of Bangkok into our clinic in Nepal, and I'm very excited, and so is Henry, that we're going to be starting our second journey here next month. We already have our surrogate lined up, and we're really excited. Hopefully we'll see some of you there. We're going to actually go over for the transfer, so we're excited about that. All right, we have time, I think, 2 minutes for questions, please. Yes, in the back we have someone.
I heard on the ABC that the embassy was quoting 3 or 4 months, and that the Nepalese government wasn't issuing birth certificates for babies because the mothers were from India and were not Nepalese women.
Incorrect.
Could you comment on that?
It's incorrect. The babies have their birth certificates. I've seen the birth certificates. The surrogate mother is Indian. The babies have their birth certificates, yeah. And if you go to the Australian High Commission website, they're quoting 6 to 8 weeks. But they've always quoted 6 to 8 weeks in India anyway. So case of media not getting it right.
And do you have identity release egg donors?
The donation is anonymous. If you use a local Indian or Nepali donor, you can get a non-anonymous donor. You'll need to fly one in with one of the agencies. But yes, that's absolutely possible.
Any other questions? Oh, we have over here.
What are typically the costs involved in Nepal and also in Mexico?
Can't hear. everyone's different, of course, and it's important to look at your package and see what is included and what is not included. Okay, so it ranges. I've seen as low as $27,000, but your baby birth is not included in that, which is in the vicinity of three to 5,000. I've heard 7. I've heard 10. I don't know. I don't work with other clinics. Some agencies and clinics offer multiple tries. And essentially, we run on that model. So with ours is 40,000, all inclusive, with lots of stuff in there. But we negotiate with clients, because if you're not going to be doing 4 frozen embryo transfers and you've only got 2 embryos and you only want 2, well, then we bring the price down for that.
It's a difficult question to answer,
Yeah.
because there's so many,
There's so
comparing
many unique
apples and oranges
situations,
a
yeah.
lot. But,
Yeah.
we're running out of time. I think we have time for one more question. If you want more information about that, stop by and see us over there, Family Surrogacy, and we'll be able to speak with you one-on-one and provide that information for you. One more question I think we have time for. Anyone? Okay, good. If anybody wants to come and chat with us on the side, we're here for the rest of the day and the evening, and Henry and I are here until Tuesday, actually. We'd be happy to meet with you, any of you, on one-on-one basis if you'd like. It'd be our pleasure. Thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it. Thank you.